I was just hoping for a quiet weekend at my cabin. Nothing fancy, just peace, trees, and maybe some coffee on the porch. But the moment I pulled into the driveway a day earlier than planned, I knew something was off. The air smelled like grilled meat, laughter echoed from the backyard, and smoke curled above the trees. That's when I saw them half a dozen strangers in my yard, setting up a full-blown BBQ party like it was their own property. And right in the middle of it all, Karen from the HOA, sunglasses on, barking orders like she owned the place. I barely had time to ask what was going on before she spotted me, and that's when things really got strange. Her eyes widened, her face turned red, and without a word, she stormed off, only to return moments later, shouting that the cops were on their way. Apparently, I was trespassing on my own land. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why was Karen so panicked? And why were her friends acting like they belonged there? I had a feeling this went deeper than a neighborhood misunderstanding. I grabbed my phone and that's when everything started to unravel. Karen had always been a bit controlling in the HOA meetings, nagging about lawn heights, barking about mailbox paint, and always keeping a clipboard close like it gave her power. But this was something else entirely. I walked around to the back, trying to keep calm, only to find people I didn't recognize lounging on my patio furniture, sipping drinks and treating my place like some kind of rental lodge. When I asked who they were, they just stared at me, like I was the intruder. One guy even laughed and said, "Karen said the owner wasn't coming back until Monday." That hit me hard. How would Karen know my schedule so well? And more importantly, why did she tell them that? Meanwhile, Karen was pacing in the front yard on her phone, glancing at me like I'd just broken into a stranger's home. She kept lowering her voice, and walking away felt shady. I tried asking her calmly what was going on, but all she said was, "You're making a mistake coming back early." That line stuck with me. What kind of mistake? Why would my own return be a problem? Something definitely wasn't right, and I wasn't leaving until I got answers. I stepped onto the porch, still trying to process what was happening. One of the guests, a woman in a sun hat, looked me up and down and muttered, "Karen said this place was up for short-term rental." That's when it hit me she was using my cabin like an Airbnb, probably pocketing the money on the side. My name wasn't even listed in the HOA rental records, so she must have forged something, or worse, used her position to bypass the rules entirely. I went inside to check for damage, and that's when I noticed small things missing nothing. Too valuable, but odd. A throw blanket my grandmother made. A framed photo of my parents. My coffee mug collection rearranged. It felt wrong, violated even. I took photos of everything, heart pounding. Karen had always seemed nosy, but I never thought she'd go this far. Outside, overheard her whispering to one of her friends, "If he finds out everything, we're screwed." That stopped me cold. Just how many people were in on this? Started recording on my phone, just in case. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just a neighbor's mistake. It was a scheme maybe bigger than I imagined, and I had just walked into the middle of it. I stepped back outside, phone still recording, and caught Karen looking directly at me. Her expression shifted from fake concern to something colder like. She knew the game was up, but was still holding on to her control. A few of her friends were starting to get uneasy too, whispering and glancing around like they realized they might have walked into something illegal. One guy grabbed a cooler and quietly slipped it into his truck, avoiding eye contact with me. That's when I noticed Karen had a folder in her hands. She was flipping through papers nervously, hiding them the moment I got close. I didn't say anything. I just watched. Every instinct in me said that folder held something important, maybe. The fake rental documents or a proof of payment from these guests. And if that was true, Karen wasn't just breaking HOA guidelines. She was committing fraud. Then, the sound of tires on gravel. The sheriff's SUV pulled up slow, lights flashing but no sirens. Karen immediately flagged him down, launching into a dramatic story about how I was a squatter and she was just trying to protect the community. But the moment the deputy turned to me and asked, "Sir, do you have proof this is your property?" I knew things were about to explode. I pulled out my phone and opened the property deed I had saved in my cloud. "This is my name, my cabin. And I have every right to be here," I said, my voice calm but tight. The deputy took the phone, scanned it, and nodded slowly. Karen's face froze, but she wasn't backing down. "That doesn't explain the complaint," she snapped. "He's unstable. He threatened us." The guests looked at each other, confused now. A few of them started quietly packing their things, clearly uncomfortable with how fast things were unraveling. But then came the twist no one expected. Another car pulled up. Out stepped a younger man in a suit, clipboard in hand, and a county badge around his neck. He introduced himself as a city inspector. Apparently, someone had filed a report about unlicensed short-term rentals and forged HOA approvals. Karen's face turned pale. She started stammering, saying it must be a mistake, but the inspector already had a list, and her name was right on top. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my cabin. Karen had been doing this to multiple homes in the area. I wasn't. Her first target, just the first to come back early. And now, the whole web of lies was beginning to tighten. The inspector didn't waste time. He handed the deputy a report showing multiple forged HOA rental permits, all linked back to Karen. My cabin was just one of 5 properties she'd been secretly listing under fake accounts. She'd been pocketing rental fees, hosting parties, and using her position in the HOA to manipulate records. One of the guests, overhearing everything, pulled up his payment receipt sent to an email that clearly wasn't mine. It matched the inspector's list. That was the final nail. Karen tried to grab the folder and walk off, but the deputy stepped in. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stay right here." She looked stunned, like she couldn't believe her authority had finally cracked. As they questioned her, the other guests began to leave quietly, some apologizing to me on the way out. A few even offered to testify if needed. Just when I thought it was over, the inspector handed me a copy of something unexpected, an anonymous tip letter that had sparked the investigation. "Thought you should know," he said. I opened it, and at the bottom was a name I hadn't heard in years. My old neighbor, Greg, who moved out after a bitter feud with Karen over HOA dues. Turns out, I wasn't the only one waiting for the truth to catch up with her in the weeks that followed. Karen was removed from the HOA board and faced legal action for fraud and property misuse. The guests she misled were refunded by the platform she'd used under false identities, and several homeowners came forward with their own stories. I fixed up the minor damage to my cabin, changed the locks, and finally got that quiet weekend I was hoping for, this time with the doors locked and my phone off. The best part: Greg and I reconnected. Turns out, he'd been keeping tabs on the neighborhood from afar, waiting for the right moment to expose Karen's scams. His tip finally gave the city enough to investigate, and it just so happened I arrived early enough to see the whole thing fall apart in person. Looking back, it was never just about one backyard BBQ or a few strangers on my porch. It was about standing up for what's right, even when it feels like you're the only one doing it. HOA drama can get messy, but sometimes people like Karen go too far. And when they do, the truth always finds a way out. So, if you ever return home early and something feels off, trust that gut feeling. You never know what story might be unfolding.